All right, beautiful people. Welcome back again to episode 4 of the Segway True Drift Kart build. So, in the previous episode, we finally got this thing sliding, and we were able to do it using PVC tires in the rear, shaving off the handbrake that comes with the Segway that makes contact with them and clearancing a few items, and it really actually did a pretty good job. The major limitation was the fact that this thing has very, very little steering angle. So today's the episode that probably most people are going to be interested in. I know if I was still in the market deciding what I was going to do with a drift kart, this would be an episode that I definitely was interested in, because I don't think to this point anybody has actually reviewed the Battle Aero Kit or showed it in action. So that's the goal today, is we're going to get that installed. I haven't even opened it up yet, so this will be completely new to me as well. We're going to get it installed. We're going to measure the angle as stock. We're going to measure the angle with the Battle Aero Kit, and then we are going to take it on a test drive, and we'll match up the videos with it, before we install the Battle Aero Kit and after as well. So hopefully you have all the information you need to know whether this is a route that you want to go with your kart. So I've already taped off things and marked them here. We have the stock straight, stock trailing, and stock lead wheel, and we'll start measuring some things and see what it looks like. All right, so let's take a look at this. So stock, there is a pretty fair amount of toe out on these carts, which I believe is pretty common in like RC drift cars, drift carts, because it helps you to maintain a little bit more stability when the cart is moving sideways. So we're going to start off and we will look at the leading wheel. So the leading wheel, we are at, we're roughly just under 30 degrees of steering angle. For reference, if you're not super familiar with drift cars and angle, my S13 gets about like almost 70 degrees of steering angle, and typically a lot of your more purpose-built drift karts actually have even more angle than real drift cars. So 30 degrees is not much at all. Let's look at let's see what the trailing wheel gets. So the trailing wheel is at 5. So the trailing wheel is at about 17 degrees. So you got a total arc of about 47 degrees, which, like I said, is a really, really, really shallow angle. It's going to make it super hard for you to be able to hold a drift that's on a lot of angle without spinning out. Because basically, once the front wheels can't turn to where the rotation of the cart is moving it in the direction of the front wheels, once you get to that point, then you're going to loop around the front wheel. So it makes it very, very hard to maintain any kind of angle while you drift. So I'm going to write that down, and then we're going to start working on installing the Battle Aero Kit. Here's everything that comes in the kit. Basically, you've got your 2 tie rods, you've got a left knuckle, a right knuckle, you got your hardware, and then this is your center mounting piece. So it's a pretty simple setup. There's no directions in the box, but the directions online are pretty well, there's not really directions online, but the pictures are pretty well detailed to where you shouldn't really need directions. And I say that before I do this, so we'll see how this goes. But yeah, so nice kit so far. Let's go ahead and start putting some things together. All right, so the first thing that we've assembled is the knuckle. So this knuckle will be the one for the left side of the cart if you're in the cart. All right, and one thing I want to show you that's really cool about this kit is that it features adjustable Ackerman settings. So these 3 holes right here, what Ackerman is basically, it is the amount that the lead wheel turns versus the trailing wheel. So like we've measured, the lead wheel is turning 30 degrees, the trailing wheel is turning 17 degrees, right? I know on the Battle Aero carts, I believe he says he has those set up for 0 Ackerman, which would mean that when the lead wheel is turning 30 degrees, so is the trailing wheel. And what this will do is essentially it changes the grip characteristics in the turn. I have this knuckle set up just on the middle setting, and then we'll probably install it, play with it. It's a really simple thing to adjust. All we'll have to do is we'll have to take this nut out and remove this stuff off the top, and then just put it into the different slot that it needs to go in, which that'll be able to be done on the cart without having to remove the knuckle from the cart or anything like that. So this one is generally put together. We'll put the other one together, and then we'll start working on getting them onto the cart. All right, so now that our tie rods are on there and we're mostly assembled, we're going to go ahead and start disassembling what we need to get the old knuckles off and the old tie rods off. So first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to remove the foot plate, which typically is on here. So you've got 6 screws, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and they're going in holes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. The 2 forwardmost screws are the shortest, and then the other 2 longer screws are going to go in those back 2 slots, and you just need a Phillips head screwdrivers for those. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to remove the tie rod, which is a 4mm Allen key, and then to get the knuckle out, it is a 6mm Allen key at the top, and at the bottom of it you need a 10mm. Of course it doesn't want to focus. 10mm Allen key. So you'll need to hold the top and twist the bottom, or vice versa, or else it just spins. And then the last thing to do is remove the wheel. This step I'm putting kind of out of order, because what I did first was removed the bolt. It's a 19mm hex bolt. I removed that while the knuckle was still attached first, and then so I had leverage on it, and then I removed the knuckle with the wheel on it, and then all I did was just take a hammer and give a whack to where that knuckle was coming into the wheel, and it popped right off. And then you also have that little washer, which sits on the outside of the wheel in between the bolt and in between the nut and the knuckle. Sorry, I'm running low on sleep here. So as far as the knuckle goes, we've got everything disassembled here. So here's the old knuckle. There's the new one. You can see that it's a lot shorter, which is going to change the leverage point there. And then, like I mentioned, you can adjust this hole further inward or further outward to allow for more or less Ackerman. I'm probably going to go ahead and just adjust it. I'm not sure, but I'm going to try to end up with 0 Ackerman, I think is what I'm going to go with, which will put both wheels pointing the same amount of degrees when I'm in turn. This next step was a little bit funky. I don't know if the manufacturing tolerances were just a hair too tight or what, but basically what is supposed to happen is you have the knuckle from Battle Aero. All right, is the order is supposed to go knuckle on the outside, then there's these gold sleeves, which are a replacement for this stock part right here. All right, so these gold sleeves are supposed to slip into the hole in the stock arm here, and then you've got the stock arm on the bottom side. That gold sleeve is supposed to slip into the hole. It's got a lip that'll be on the outside, and then you've got the other side of the knuckle. For me, it was like a millimeter-ish too tight for it to be able to fit this around the outside of both the sleeve and the stock arm. So what I ended up having to do, and we'll see how this works out, was basically just take a plier and grip this and bend them just a hair. I think you can kind of see the bend a little bit there. And I think that what I'm gonna do is then kind of hammer it / bend it back out. I don't think it'll actually cause any trouble that it's bent, because it's bent on this end, but then everything's running through this rod in the sleeve. So all of this is still straight. It's just basically this lip right here is a little bit bent. So I may try to straighten that back out, hammer it back out, and see what happens. But that's the first snag that I've run into on this part of the project. Now I've gotten the old tie rod off, I've got the new tie rod on, and what I did was, with any suspension work, I'll always try to just kind of eyeball a line and make sure that any arm that I take off, the new arm that I put on is roughly the same length, so that then when it's time to get everything lined up, hopefully I'm at least at a decent starting point and I don't have to do anything but make minor adjustments. The great majority of this mod is plug and play, but we are going to have to remove these springs, and then we're going to have to drill a small hole right in the middle of the steering arm. That's the only thing that we have to actually modify the chassis. Otherwise, everything else is just going to be bolt on. So I'm going to remove these springs and then work on that hole. Springs are removed, so now I have access to do what I need to do with the drill. I think I will hold on to the springs because I'm not sure how not having them is going to impact the steering feel. And so I may end up putting them back on if I'm able to, once I get everything installed. One really small thing to note, and it's not a big complaint, but this was another one where these two holes, so basically what this is it's a little spacer that's then going to allow you to mount, instead of the tie rods mounting to the outside holes, now they're going to mount to the top and bottom of this middle hole. So it's basically just a spacer, and it's also a template for where to drill. These two bolt holes are spaced just barely not enough to line up true with the two existing holes. So just another kind of little small manufacturing defect to be aware of, though, because like with me, I kind of just fought it on there and almost ended up stripping these bolts, which wouldn't have been fun. The better way to do it, that I didn't do it, would probably have just been to take a drill and just bore the bolt hole out to just a little bit bigger, so you had a little wiggle room, and then it would have lined up just fine. All right, we'll see if this actually worked or not. In the directions, well, I mean, they're not really directions. Most of the stuff, like I said, is pretty detailed in the pictures. It's easy to see. The one thing that's not is what size this hole is supposed to be. I went with a 3/8 so that the sleeve could fit through, because if not, the sleeve protrudes past the edge of the threads, and then you wouldn't be able to use the sleeve on both tie rods, which they're going to need so that they can spin freely on there. So 3/8 inch hole, and then like I said, that spacer thing is really, it's just a drill template. It looks like you probably don't use the spacer because you won't actually have space for you to use that unless you get yourself a longer bolt. So it appears from their pictures and from me fitting it up that you basically you bolt it on to these two holes, and then it acts as a drill template to give you this middle hole, and then you drill it out to 3/8 inches. All right, so I have one side on there, and I just want to make a quick note of something that you need to remember. I think doing this the right way, what I would have done is after I took off the foot cover, the plastic foot cover, when these fell out, I would have gone ahead and put them back in and reinstalled it to hold my frame adjustment correctly. But since I didn't, before you start working on the other side and take that one off and those fall out too, you have to put them back in, and you're gonna have to put them back in before you put on the plastic foot cover again. So that's gonna go into hole 1 and hole 2, and also make sure that you haven't lost that spring in the process. Angle kit is on. Before we get to the fun stuff, I do want to touch on a couple of pitfalls that I ran into, just to help other people out so they don't make the same mistake. So the biggest one was when I first got everything tightened down. Remember how I had to bend those tabs to get these things to fit? You can still see they're a little bit bent still. One, the bend was too much. Two, I over tightened that bottom bolt and it pushed those things in even more, and then the wheels were not able to turn side to side freely. So I went back, I kind of unbent them a little and flattened them out a little. I may do a little bit more because the steering is still a little bit stiff, but that did help to correct. Now I can steer back and forth. The other thing is that bottom bolt, I basically now just have it tightened until it's touching, and then like a half turn after that. I have the Ackerman set to the furthest inward setting, which should produce the least amount of Ackerman. So we'll check that out in a second. And I think that is pretty much everything as we go through this. So, y'all ready to see the angle? A couple quick disclaimers before I start talking about the measurements. Still need to definitely toy with the alignment some. You can see just from a quick eye test that it is not aligned evenly. Also, you can also watch that the steering arc changes massively. So if you look at the old tape marks, everything was coming through pretty much steering on center. But now with the new Ackerman, you can see how far off of the center of the axle line here we now get there and there. So there. All right. So there will be definitely some differences in how this feels, and I'll have to get used to those. And it's also going to affect our measurements here as we change the length of those tie rods. So, but still pretty good results. Got the new lead wheel is 50 degrees. The new trailing wheel is 40 degrees. So we're not quite at 0, but we're pretty close, a whole lot closer than we were before with 30 and 17. From a percentage standpoint, yeah, it's not quite double on the lead wheel. It is over double on the trailing wheel. And the total arc goes from 47 to 90, so almost exactly double. So I'm going to take it out on a test drive and see how it drives. It may be terrible because of the bad alignment, and that's fine. But I just want to see how this is. Now, for reference, the Battle Aero karts, I believe, get almost 90. It's kind of ridiculous the amount of angle they get. So it will be interesting to drive with them and chase them. And I know like the crazy karts are like, I think they might even go over. They have shopping cart basically wheels on them, so they basically get 90 or 90 plus. So it'll be interesting to see how it drives with other karts, but I'm super hyped to see how this drives, and let's get it out there and take some test spins. Well, folks, I think we finally have ourselves a drift kart. I was able to actually throw it and catch the transition. Man, that was a whole lot of fun. The steering is definitely very heavy. There's a lot of resistance. So I need to play with some things. Maybe it's those bent knuckles. Maybe I need to unbend those some more, and it'll make it a little smoother. But the steering is definitely very heavy. It's not the worst thing in the world, since it is a go-kart, so you're not getting a bunch of rotations from the steering wheel that you got to fight or anything like that. You kind of just throw it side to side. I'm definitely still getting some rubbing on, I think, this right rear wheel. So I'm going to need the clearance. Probably, I'm guessing, probably get a little more clearance there because I could hear it wanting to rub a little bit. And then I need to figure out the alignment. I need to dial that in a little bit more. But overall, very drivable, able to actually get some speed, able to get much more sideways, much more angle, able to be able to maintain the drift in a wider radius, but still on angle without having to really pull back on the angle. That was great. That was great. I think this has been a very worthwhile project, and it's with some more dialing in, it's going to be really good. I went ahead and added the spring back on. This is definitely not something you have to do. It's more of a driver preference thing, and I just wanted to test out and see how it felt, the steering felt. If you want to add the spring back on, what you'll have to do is it'll make contact. Since normally the arms are mounted out here, there's no point for contact, but now that the Battle Aero Kit moves them into the middle, it'll make contact with that nut right there. So what I had to do was add an extra nut here as a spacer, and then that moves the spring out just a little bit, and now it doesn't make contact anymore. And there is enough thread engagement to get this nut on there and safely and tightly. So I'm going to take it out on a test drive and see if I want to keep it. But if you do want to keep the spring on there, you'll have to do that spacer method. For my personal preference, I think I like the spring. It made it feel a little bit less kind of notchy and gave it a little bit of a smoother steering feel. It's going to be driver preference. You may prefer it the other way. It does give you a little bit more resistance when you're not in drift, but when you're in drift, one thing that you'll learn is that the steering, a lot of it is turning itself as the weight transfers. So you don't really have to deal with the heavy steering as much. So a lot of it's going to come down to personal preference, but it's up to you. Another small note for my specific scenario, and I don't know if I did something wrong or if it's potentially that they changed the thickness of this between the Go Kart Pro and then the Go Kart Pro 2, because I know that the Battle Aero Kit was developed on the Go Kart Pro. But for me, I ended up having to get a longer bolt. So the one that comes, I believe, is an M6 25 millimeter socket cap screw. I went ahead and went to a 35 millimeter, which was just enough to get thread engagement on the nut on the opposite side. The other thing too was I did clearance initially that hole to 3/8 inches so that I could have a sleeve in there. Turns out that the sleeves are about the same length as the tie rod themselves, so they don't actually protrude into that hole. So there actually is potentially some play there. It's not because they're tightened together, but you could probably actually do 5/16 inch would be more appropriate instead of the 3/8 inch. So you won't have any play in the middle section potentially. You need to start digging into the electronic side of things. The throttle wants to cut out a little bit sometimes at inopportune times. So I need to figure out if there's anything I can do to improve that. I've already got it. I've already got the drift setting on where it's supposed to be directing 100% of the power to the rear wheels. Also, another thing was I tried to use the manual mode the other day, and it wants to downshift on me all the time. So if there's any way to turn off the auto shifting, that would be awesome. I don't think there is from what I've looked around on, but it would be awesome to be able to kind of have a pretend manual drift cart and be able to upshift, downshift as needed to get more revs. But I don't know that that's going to be a thing. Yeah. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope that it was helpful, and I hope that you enjoyed. On the next episode, we're going to start digging into the electronic side of things. We're going to put a secondary battery on this. We're going to run all of our lights and other things off of, and we're going to start getting this thing prepped for some night driving with underglow, with headlights, and also some functional brake lights. So tune in for those in the upcoming episodes. But thank you guys for watching, and I hope this has been useful to you guys. Please hit that like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.